Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Danny Plugger, and I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Transit Association. I want to thank everybody and welcome everybody to this month's VTA and DRPT Lunch and Learn virtual webinar series. VTA is very excited about this partnership and the opportunity to offer our members and the Commonwealth's transit community a deeper dive into the planning challenges, issues, and processes with insight from the experts at DRPT. This webinar series would not be possible without the support, partnership, and expertise of DRPT, especially Alan and Bethel. Today's program is reviewing project delivery methods. As always, if you have any questions during the presentation, please put them in the Q&A box, and I'll ask them at the appropriate time. Now, this afternoon, I have the pleasure of introducing our partners in this webinar series and today's presenters, Alan and Bethel. Bethel supports DRPT's Northern Virginia office in Alexandria. She's a graduate of the University of Virginia and is a licensed professional engineer in the Commonwealth. She began her career at VDOT and joined DRPT in 2022. Alan Saunders manages DRPT's statewide engineering program and is based in Richmond. He graduated from VMI and has had a 30-year career both in the private and public sectors. And also prior to joining DRPT, Alan also worked at VDOT, rising to the role of the Louisa residency engineer. Combined, Alan and Bethel are DRPT's engineering dynamic duo. And so please grab your lunch, sit back, and enjoy a great program from Alan and Bethel this afternoon. Briefly, a couple other points. This purpose of this webinar series is to focus on various planning challenges, issues, and processes with insight from DRPT and their support team. And this offers VTA's members a more in-depth overview of the specific topics of interest to your team. And we have a couple updating or upcoming webinars beyond just today's. In October, we'll be looking at value engineering and lead, and then safety management plans in December. Please, if there are any additional topics that you're interested in that you or your teams would like to see reviewed and get a little bit more in-depth knowledge on, please let me know. In this program, we're anticipating that it will continue into next year. And so Alan, Bethel, and I are planning out the schedule for next year. And so please let us know what you want to learn and what you want to hear. And with that, I will turn over to Alan and Bethel.
All right, Danny, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to do this outreach through the VTA. And we've got a great topic to go over today. What we're going to discuss today are project delivery methods. We've spent a lot of time over the past year talking about different elements of the project management plan, the PMP. There are several projects out there that get a little hung up between design and construction. And we see new alternate delivery methods that are being introduced to the industry. So we wanted to talk today about project delivery methods and go over some detail about 4 key delivery methods. And we also want to talk about the procurement phase, that step between design and construction, and some lessons learned that Bethel and I have had since we started at DRPT last year. So thank you very much for joining. Appreciate it. And we'll get started, Danny. All right, so the first step, we're going to talk about project delivery. And if anything that we emphasize today is that, as with any of the topics that we go over, DRPT is here to help. Engage us as early as possible, especially when you're thinking about a delivery method. And we also encourage professional construction management, getting a construction manager on board early in the process as soon as possible to help you navigate through your construction projects. Unlike VDOT, many of you may only do a couple of projects in your career. So we're here to help you through them. And the construction managers within the industry are also very familiar with all steps of the process, and they're a great resource if you engage one early. So delivery methods today. Choosing an overall project delivery and contracting strategy is one of the most important decisions made by any transit project owner. Several different delivery methodologies we'll talk about today, along with an examination of how certain risks are addressed in each of them. The development of a project delivery strategy early in the project is critical because the design of the project is directly linked to the strategy. Prior to embarking on the design, the project sponsor should select a project delivery method that minimizes project risks and provides the greatest likelihood of implementation success. Success can be measured in several different terms, but quite simply, it's cost overruns and schedule. Finishing your project on budget and on schedule. The rationale for the early decision on the contracting approach is that it's essential to establish various roles and responsibilities to avoid duplication of efforts or schedule delays, basically. The contracting approach will directly influence the design or scope of work. It would be different for design bid build than design build. So if you're going to procure a construction manager or an architect and engineer, the scope of their services after feasibility in NEPA will vary. In addition to the use of an alternate project delivery approach, this will influence the means and methods by how you support the project as a sponsor. And really, the project sponsor should recognize, especially for a large transit project that can involve combinations of contracting approaches to implement the overall project, where you're procuring construction managers, professional services after your feasibility study, and then a contractor. You really need to think that through as early as possible. Some background, public procurement law has historically limited public agencies to using only design bid build. In Virginia, we've seen some very progressive approaches to construction project delivery. There's a wide range, and we're only going to focus on 4 today, but there's a wide range for publicly funded transit projects in the US. The development of the public procurement laws limiting agencies to use the design bid build project delivery method can be traced back to the Brooks Act in 1972. But since then, the US DOT and its framework have appreciated the merits of the different delivery methods. And through the years, not only have they begun to allow design build in different forms, but also construction management at risk. I do want to note that in Virginia, prior to making a determination to use a construction management or design build delivery method, the local transit agency or public body should either have in its employ or under contract a licensed architect or engineer who shall advise the public body regarding the use of construction management at risk or design build and assist the public body with the preparation of the contract documents. So if you do elect to go use an alternate project delivery method other than design bid build, you need to have a PE or an architect establish the rationale for why you're going to do that and then support you in developing those contract documents. So that was just a quick overview and some history, and I'll pass the torch to Bethel.
All right, so there are multiple definitions that you can find for delivery method, and I'm just going to read the few that are on the screen right here. So US DOT and FTA says the overall approach selected by the sponsor to contract for those services necessary to place the project in revenue service. CMAA, which is the Construction Management Association of America, say first, it's a strategy for a construction project's legal agreements with one or more entities or parties to organize the design, construction, operations, and maintenance services from conception to occupancy. And the TRB, the Transportation Research Board, they have a transit cooperative research program. And they've developed a report 13.1, which is their guidebook for the evaluation of project delivery methods. And they say that the project delivery method is the process by which a construction project is comprehensively designed and constructed for an owner, including project scope definition, organization of designers, constructors, and various consultants, sequencing of design and construction operations, execution of design and construction, and then the closeout and the startup of the project. And so essentially, like with all of that, I think what we want to communicate is that there really is no one size fits all for delivery methods. Like Alan already mentioned, there are several different types, and we'll talk about a few now. But regardless, the delivery method that you use should be selected based on how well it satisfies your goals as the sponsor, as the owner. And those goals will maybe include rapid construction or the lowest possible construction cost, or even if you have a unique, innovative design that you want to include as part of your project, or it could be something else. But whatever your goals are, need to be clearly understood and articulated before developing your delivery plan so that it actually is encompassing the goals that you have. And then along with that, like Alan mentioned, some of the state laws, but you need to understand what the limitations are with the delivery methods, the attributes of each one, and then what the inherent strengths and weaknesses are before you select one. And then once you do, documenting your choice, your rationale for that delivery method, and that your contracting strategy in your PMP, your project management plan, or any other plan like your procurement management plan. And then once you, or really and then before you begin your development or your engineering phase, before even your grant is executed, DRPT can review your proposal and just help make sure that that is the correct delivery method for the goals that you have. And that can be especially helpful for us to review it when you have an alternative project delivery method. So that is something that we can assist every locality with as they move through and just determine what the scope of their project is, what your risks are, what your goals are. We're here to help. And then Alan's going to go through this more in the next slide, but the general philosophy is that the risks should really be assigned to the party that's best able to manage that, those risks. And so he'll talk more about that in the next slide. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Bethel. And Bethel went through several different definitions of project delivery method. And all of them, based on the theater of the construction project, are termed a little differently. And none of them mention the word risk, but it really is all about the risk. Construction contracting and delivery methods present a unique set of challenges for transit agencies. And in recent years, the trends in the industry has been away from the traditional design, bid, build, delivery method, that linear process, and gone to more alternative project delivery methods. And there are some presumptions or misconceptions within each of them that all of the risk shifts over to another party. And it makes all the risks go away for the project sponsor, and that's not necessarily the case. It is really all about risk, and your project delivery method refers to all contractual relationships, not just with the contractor, with your consultants, with your construction managers, and the responsibilities of every single party that's involved in the project. So we're going to focus on 4, and I listed a 5th honorable mention in there that I wanted to note while we had your ear today. The 4 approaches are the traditional approach, or design, bid, build, what many of us are used to. Construction management at risk is another. It's also referred to as CM, or independent contractor, CMGC, or CM guaranteed maximum price, GMP. But CM at risk is also another alternative project delivery method that we wanted to review. Design build has many different options and different, different flavors of it. The 2 that we're going to focus on today are DesignBuild Traditional and DesignBuild Progressive. We'll discuss the pros and cons of each in more detail in the next slides. And I want to note that the FTA does not require, for those of you who have FTA funded projects, not all of them are, but for those of you who have FTA funded projects, FTA does not require the use of any particular project delivery method. They don't require you to use design, bid, build, or design build, or CM at risk. But what they do require is to justify any innovative approach outside of design, bid, build in order to ensure that the recipient, the project sponsor, has the legal authority under state law to proceed with the proposed alternative delivery method, and to ensure the risk is carefully managed so as not to negatively impact the project's scope, schedule, and budget. Each delivery method and contracting tool shifts risk from one party to the other, while the traditional design, bid, build approach With that, the project sponsor assumes most of the risk, but at the same time, you may accomplish your project at the least cost. Selecting a project delivery method requires the project sponsor to perform a thorough risk identification and assessment early in the project development process. Employing a delivery method that transfers risk to the contractor may seem like an easy fix to address certain complex project issues, but it also means that the contract price and your project price will include contingencies associated with that risk. So it's not free. Just because you've written a provision in one of your contracts to pass and allocate a risk over to another party, it doesn't make the risk go away. And you still have to pay for it. And sometimes you have to pay more for that risk because they know less about it than you do. So it really is all about the risk. A properly selected contracting and delivery method will work in the interests of the procuring agency to provide a product or service that meets the agency's need at a reasonable price without undue risks to the contractor and without excessive contract administration costs and contractor claims. A contracting method poorly suited to the complexity of the requirement may shift greater risk to the project sponsor that could result in a less than desirable project outcome. Some of the risks, when you go through early in the project, it may make much more sense for you to keep them and to establish a delivery method and strategy around those risks and make sure they're assigned to the party that can best mitigate them. Since the delivery method really establishes how these risks are allocated between the project sponsor, the construction contractor, and third parties, for transit agencies without dedicated engineering and project management resources, we again strongly recommend engaging a professional construction manager as early as possible in the project development process. DRPT, Bethel and I, we're here to help. And we're here to help you develop a plan for project delivery. And also we'll make sure that it's permissible in Virginia. And before we move on to the next slide, I do want to note that job order contracting, honorable mention, for many of you who don't have dedicated procurement resources, for smaller projects, the Department of General Services has a job order contract in place. They've already procured it. By issuing a simple purchase order in EVA under this contract that's already established, you can perform many small projects. And by small projects, I'm thinking about transit stop improvements or bus shelter installations. Not big one, there's a threshold there. But if you have any questions about a small project, the job order contracting is a great tool. It is another method to deliver your project and another tool. So I'll pass the torch, Bethel. Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll go ahead and talk about traditional design bid build, which is still the most common delivery method right now for construction projects. The project phases are executed linearly, where one phase has to be completed before you can begin the next phase, and it's the project sponsor who manages that whole process. And so the design phase begins with the project sponsor hiring a designer, either an architect or engineer. And then during design, the architect or engineer will prepare any necessary drawings, specifications that the contractor's team is going to need to complete the construction work. And once the design's complete, procurement follows, and then construction. And the project sponsor is responsible for all of the details of the design and then warrants the quality of the construction design documents to the construction contractor. In addition, all of the financing responsibility rests on the sponsor, who manages all of the interfacing between the contracts to select the lowest price responsive and the responsible bidder, and is responsible for the operation and maintenance of the completed project as well. And so the pros of this method, historically, like we said, it's the most common and so the most familiar project delivery method. In addition, the project sponsor has the most control with administering both design and construction. And so because more bidders are familiar with this method, you're usually going to result in more competitive bids and lower costs. Some of the cons, though, is the duration. Because of the sequential nature of the development and delivery, it's probably going to require more time than other delivery methods to complete a project. And then with risks, beyond control of contractor, like there could be cases such as like severe weather, unforeseen ground conditions, et cetera. And all of those risks are going to be borne by the project sponsor, i.e. you. And so those are some of the pros and cons of this approach that is very common. I'm sure most of you have used this approach. The project sponsor takes the most risk. It can result in longer project timeframes, but you are able to get to 100% design. You are able to understand the full scope of what needs to be done and pass that on to the contractor and be confident with that, with your project scope. Okay, we can go to the next one.
All right, thank you, Bethel. It seems like a new approach, construction management at risk, but it's been a while. It's been around for a while, and it really is. We're talking about this next after design bid build because construction manager at risk is really an extension of design bid build. It's another flavor of that. Under this approach, the project sponsor can retain full control of the design. It still requires 100% plans. But you can also engage a construction manager and contractor early in the process to address elements such as constructability reviews, cost estimating, and scheduling. In the design bid build delivery method, you're engaged with an architect and an engineer who is developing 100% construction plans for you and then passing the torch to a contractor. In this method, when an acceptable level of engineering is achieved in the design phase, the parties can negotiate a guaranteed maximum price and begin construction. The project sponsor chooses their designer, then chooses their construction manager, or vice versa, both on a qualifications basis. It's not low bid, it's qualifications based. The CM can provide professional construction management services as the owner's agent early in the project development process. When the design is complete or to a certain stage, the CM typically commits to deliver the project with a guaranteed maximum price, usually before the CM solicits bids and information from subcontractors. There's often a period of negotiations regarding the guaranteed maximum price offer, especially concerning the amount of designated costs set aside in the guaranteed maximum price for the construction manager's contingency. This is construction management at risk. The construction manager is going to have certain risks within this delivery method that they are responsible for. So that needs to be negotiated and quantified before guaranteed maximum price can be established. The owner may accept the construction manager's offer, at which the construction manager, who at first is an agent for the owner, now he shifts to an at-risk position, or CMAR, where he is responsible for delivering the project. But the owner may decide at this point to end the relationship altogether and advertise the project through the competitive bidding, i.e. back to design bid build process. And this process is known as really the owner taking the off-ramp in a CMAR relationship. The owner can revert back to design bid build to deliver the project. The construction manager, who the owner has hired, can remain an agent of the owner and continue to work for them. And the advocates for this method cite the construction advantages of the CMAR's involvement early in the process and the transparency that's involved. If the guaranteed maximum price is accepted, the construction manager at risk assumes responsibility for the entire construction package with a dual role as the general contractor's construction manager for all the work and the general contractor. The qualifications approach that you take to select your CMAR versus low bid eliminates the lengthier request for proposal process and achieves price competition through subcontractor bidding that the construction manager at risk will ultimately do. The CMAR does not eliminate design and construction interface issues. So for a smaller transit agency, you're still going to have resources to interface between these entities. It's not like design build that we're going to talk about where you have one party that you have a relationship with. With CM at risk, you still have you're in the middle between a lot of the different contracting parties. And as a result, it may be a challenging approach for some project sponsors who aren't resourced to manage this hybrid approach. Some of the pros. The main advantage of having a CM is having that constructability advice and the responsibility of that advice upfront at a very early stage of the project. The CM at risk delivery method gives more control and flexibility to the owner because you are driving the design, and especially when compared to design build. The project sponsor, you benefit from involvement of the CM in most of the decisions during the design phase. So you still get the contractor's perspective, the construction manager's perspective throughout the design. And the guaranteed maximum price as a means of risk allocation will decrease the owner's risk for specific risks that are negotiated with the GMP. The qualifications-based selection for the CM using RFP procedures and taking into consideration qualifications-based factors when evaluating your CM is much better when you can pick based on qualification than just low bid. And then the offers can help owners weed out unqualified proposers. So when you go for that qualifications based, you can weed out some who are just throwing in a low price shingle. Some of the cons with CM at risk. Although CM at risk facilitates risk management, it's not necessarily the best method for risk allocation. Having an experienced construction manager and contractor on board improves the whole process of risk management, but the increase in the number of parties directly involved in the project and some overlaps between their duties may make the risk allocation more difficult. The recipient will at some point need to award a certain amount of work to the general contractor and construction manager. So if you have a CM on board early, he proposes a guaranteed maximum price. You, the owner, accept that guaranteed maximum price. Now there's dual overhead, dual profit. He needs to make a profit. His subs need to make a profit. So sometimes it's not the least cost solution. And on top of that, he's accepting some specific risk for the project. If the owner and the CM cannot agree on a guaranteed maximum price, you may have to put the project out for bid. And that's also a risk to you. It may take longer if you cannot negotiate a GMP and then put it out for design bid build, and then you're going to be stuck with the lowest bidder anyway. So that is a risk. Most transit agencies have not used CM at risk for their projects because this is relatively new, and the agency's experience with construction management is limited mainly to hiring a construction manager as consultant. Nonetheless, the agency with the staff to manage a design bid build project should have most of the skills necessary to manage a CM at risk because of the similarities between the two. One missing skill that we do want to identify is that ability and knowledge to negotiate that guaranteed maximum price. Risks don't go away. They're transferred from one party to another. And in your guaranteed maximum price, you will very specifically identify some risks that the construction manager will accept responsibility for should they occur, and he'll include a contingency amount in his bid for those risks. There are some risks, though, that are still yours as the project sponsor. So the risk doesn't go away. You have to define which are allocated to which party. And before we go on to the next slide, Bethel, I do want a quick shout out to Arlington Transit. They're delivering their new admin maintenance and operations facility in Shirlington via CM at risk delivery method. It's an incredible project. It's very complex, and we applaud them for taking the dive. It's the first one that I'm aware of in Virginia that's doing CMAR on a transit project. So Bethel is supporting them, and quick shout out to Art. Good job.
All right, thanks, Alan. Next, DesignBuild Traditional. So this is a delivery method where the project sponsor is going to contract with a single entity that's going to provide both the design and construction services. So only one party is responsible for both. And the contractor can either be a single firm or a joint venture, or what's most common is that a general contractor and an architect engineer firm team up and take responsibility for the project. And the scope for those contracts can include the permitting, the utility relocations, right-of-way acquisition, and the the design builder can be selected based on lowest price, or a fixed fee best value selection, where you're going to make your selection based on a couple of things like price or schedule and the technical approach that they use, so that you can get the most value out of any innovation opportunities that you have on the project. There are two common methods for procuring design build contracts. There's a one-step method and then a two-step method. The one-step process involves a competitive evaluation of the technical proposals, where the contract award is based on the best value to the owner agency, usually based on the technical merit and the price. That's what you're using to make your selection. And there's a two-step process where you separate out the technical proposal from the price, and you use an RFQ or an RFP procedure instead of the traditional like design bid build invitation for bid procedures. Now, the pros of this method, from a schedule perspective, the design builder can include time savings from combining the design and the construction phases, and there's more flexibility with the construction sequencing. And then from a risk perspective, it can improve the risk transfer and quality, as well as cost savings from having shorter and sooner delivery times. And it also increases the potential for innovative cost-saving approaches and fewer change orders. In addition, the DB entity is going to be liable for like all the design and construction costs, and so they have to provide a firm and fixed price in their proposal to you. And they have an early constructability input to the design, so they're able to take charge and have an understanding of the project early. And then again, like you can have another pro, you have the ability to use quality as your selection criteria when you're evaluating the proposals that you receive. Some of the trade-offs relate to having less direct control of the design process and the specific construction methodologies that the contractor uses, as well as having a longer procurement process, and the need to create like specific performance specifications and a design build agreement. So the project sponsor in these cases has to specify the requirements that you want for your project, or you're going to be relying on the design builder to provide the best solution that they see fit. So if you don't want things like an orange kitchen, or you want a specific EV charging solution, then you have to specify those requirements in your contract documents and the RFP. And so the owner has to determine all of these requirements before selecting the design bid entity, which is also going to avoid delays and additional costs after design and construction starts. But with that, the owner kind of loses the ability to foster competition between design subconsultants and construction trade subcontractors. Now, there are other variations of design build that include design build operate transfer, DBOT. There's also DBOO, design build operate own, which can also be called lease back, and then also design build operate maintain. And so these all require the DB contractor to remain with the project after construction is complete. And with DBOM, that's similar to regular design build, traditional design build, except that the DBOM contractor assumes the operation and maintenance risks of the project and is responsible for operating the new facility or the new project according to whatever regulations and codes there are like determined in the contract. And so no matter what type of design build method you utilize, all of them are going to have the same major components. You're going to have to develop an RFQ or RFP that describes the project requirements and the performance terms. The proposals are going to be evaluated, and then once the evaluation is complete, you're going to engage with a contract award for both those to that entity for the design and construction services. And so once the project sponsors provided all the design documentation that they've developed to the DB entity, then they are liable for like all the design and construction costs and have to provide that firm fixed price in its proposal with their firm schedule. And so based on the needs of your project, the goals, the risks that you have, you can select your delivery method based like among these different variations of design build. All right.
All right, thank you, Bethel. Bethel went through and identified design build is a great delivery method in certain circumstances. It allocates certain risks over to the other contracting party, and at the same time, it gives them the flexibility to make decisions based on their best practices and means and methods to deliver a project for the best value and the best schedule. But it also has some cons. If you're an experienced owner and you've delivered a lot of projects and you're very thorough and have a very good understanding of what your requirements are, and you specify them in your RFP, design build traditional method's a great way to go. But if you're not careful and you don't specify the paint color for your kitchen, as Bethel noted, you're going to end up with whatever color is the cheapest for that design builder, or you're going to have to pay for a change order after construction has started. If you want a specific vehicle charging solution in your project, that has to be specified in the contract documents in the RFP. If you do not, you're going to get whatever the design builder can provide for the cheapest least cost, or you're going to pay for what you want through a change order after construction starts. So in recent years, a variation of the traditional design build process has emerged called progressive design build. And VDOT has begun to use progressive design build as well because of the lessons that they've learned through the traditional design build approach over the past 15 plus years. With progressive, it really refers to the way the owner and the design builder develop the design in a step-by-step progression after the selection of the design builder. With progressive design build, the design build contractor is selected based on qualifications, not low price, and is brought on as part of the owner's team at a very early stage of the project design. In contrast to the project delivery method, the CM at risk, construction management at risk, the design firm and the contractor for progressive design build are selected and contracted under a single procurement. The design build contractor will either assist the owner in developing the design or advance the design from what the owner has already started. If you've got a feasibility, if you've gone through NEPA, if you've got 30% plans, they can pick up the torch and carry it from there. At approximately 60% design, when you've got about 60% complete, the design build contractor can submit a commercial proposal to complete the design and construction for a fixed price, along with the schedule and performance guarantees. The owner, you, the project sponsor, can use a third party to verify that the cost is reasonable, and also can go traditional from that point forward. You can complete the design and go the design bid build route if the progressive design build parties cannot agree on a maximum price moving forward. So I apologize, it's kind of small, but the diagram shows the roles of the project sponsor and the design build contractor under progressive design build agreement as the project advances through the design. So some of the benefits of progressive design build, the main advantage is really there's potential to reduce procurement preparation and review costs. You're accelerating project delivery. You're taking as much time as you need to define the requirements for the critical elements of your project. You can, for example, design the site to a minimal level. But if you have specific requirements for your facility, if you have specific requirements for charging solutions, or something specific to your maintenance and operations process, you can design those to a higher degree to make sure you've determined all of your requirements. So you have more control as the owner, but you still have this design build contractor on board that you've selected through a qualifications-based procurement without paying a low bid. You have this ability to implement the project in phases or task orders. It increases your flexibility, but it needs to be managed. And you have the input of the contractor and the construction manager or their team, the design builder, on board from the very beginning. So some of the cons with Progressive Design Build: it does require you, the project sponsor, to issue numerous task orders. And you have a less certainty up front when you begin for what those construction costs are. You're not really sure what your cost estimate is going to be until you get a price offer from your design builder. There's also the selection bias at 60% design submittal. Since the incumbent design builder, he already has an ongoing contract with the procuring agency, and it offsets the cost advantages of broader competition. So where Bethel noted for DesignBidBuild, you have the highest probability of gaining the least cost, the benefits of Progressive Design Build may come at a premium price. So it's a great delivery method, and it makes up for some of the weaknesses that are in Design Build. It's promising by including that design builder very early in the project development process, it'll really help the project sponsor develop those project requirements. And to me, if you are going to go the design build route, if you engage us and you have a construction manager, transit projects can be so complex and they're so very different than what the industry is used to advancing on a VDOT project, that Progressive Design Build is a great solution that makes up for some of those weaknesses. All right, Danny, next slide. All right, now we're going to tackle this slide together. And we went through these 4 delivery methods. We talked about job order contracting and the DGS job order contract vehicle that's available for you as a tool. And if you have any questions about that, please let us know. But we wanted to go through some lessons learned. And we've got design build projects, design bid build projects, and CM at risk. So for the design bid build, one lesson learned that we really want to promote during procurement is the concept of a safety management plan. The safety management plan is an element of your project management plan, and it's critical when you take a step back and you begin to think about the sequence of construction, the design of your facility, your employees and how they work every day. Your safety management plan provides this framework for you to ensure that if they're going to back a vehicle during construction and there's an excavation nearby, that it's well lit during the winter months when it's dark outside, that your employees are going to be navigating through a construction zone to access their lounges, their restrooms, their locker rooms, the places where they park. And the safety management plan, its core focus is safety, but it really requires the project sponsor to think about construction. We bring up the concept of safety management plan. Many folks will say that safety is the contractor's responsibility. And that's true for the contractor's work and contractor's employee. The contractor's responsible for the contractor's safety. He is not responsible for your safety. You are responsible for your safety during construction. It's collaboration. And having a safety management plan, it's not just if there is an accident and it's at this stage of our day, this shift, who this person can call with emergency numbers during construction. It really forces you to think through every facet of the project and how it impacts you and your team to make sure that you stay safe from conception to the end. The safety management plan, you need to consider it when the design starts, because many safety issues can be addressed and mitigated through the design process itself so that you won't have to worry about it during construction. But having a safety management plan is key and it's critical, and it is a lesson learned that we're going to continue to focus on. As another key lesson learned, involve your operation and management team early. Do not wait until the design is complete to get them engaged. Make sure they're involved from the very beginning so they can provide that feedback about the solution that you're designing and the scope of the construction project. Third-party agreements. You cannot wait till you get till the design is complete to begin thinking about where the cable company is going to come into the project, who's going to facilitate that. You can include it in your construction contract and try to encourage the contractor to facilitate getting Cox cable or getting Dominion Energy on the site or having some sewer or water line utilities relocated. The contractor can facilitate that, but ultimately you're going to pay for them. So getting third-party agreements in place and understanding that from the very beginning of the design is critical. Have a list of them and begin mitigating and making contacts as soon as possible. Don't wait for the design to be complete. Owner-supplied materials. And Bethel noted at Orange Kitchen, if you have an office chair or what have you that's included in the scope of your project and you don't specify what it is, you may end up with an orange chair. So if you're going to provide certain things for the project, whether it's office trailers, office equipment, mechanical equipment in your operations and maintenance facility, if you're going to provide that and expect the contractor to install it the way that you want, that's going to take a lot of coordination and it puts risk on you. DBE goals. Having good DBE goals requires you to have a very thorough cost estimate for your project. You can't have a lump sum from your architect or engineer because you're going to gauge your DBE goals on certain trades and the availability of certain subcontractors in your area and the cost of their work. So understanding the scope of work and having a detailed schedule of values and cost estimates for your projects throughout the life of the design is critical so that you can begin to think about your DBE goals. This folds into the next item, your independent cost estimate, your ICE, and funding. Do not wait until the end of the design to ask your architect to develop a detailed cost estimate and make sure that it's aligned with your funding. You think you live in a world where you get a cost estimate, you may have to then apply to a transit agency like DRPT for additional funding if you don't have enough. Your locality has to provide the match, and that may take a cycle coordinating with your local government and put you into a future fiscal year. Updating your cost estimates and making sure they're aligned with your project funding is a critical step that you need to do throughout design. Project controls. Project controls is really critical. And you have several different parties during the design phase. You, DRPT, our consultants, your architect and engineer, all of you have stuff and you need to collaborate, and all that stuff needs to live somewhere. And then as you get into construction, your contractor is going to have a lot of stuff that he's going to give to you, and you're going to have to do something with it. So thinking about a management information system and practice that you're going to have both during design and construction is very important. Updating your cost estimates and budgets. Your construction phase includes so much more than the contract amount. You have consultants to pay. You have office trailers and other owner-supplied materials and things that you're going to purchase in addition to that construction contract. Having someone there to keep up with what is your budgets, what are your cost estimates, what are your expenditures, and what is your estimate at completion. Those are 4 different things, and having someone to keep up with it is critical. Thinking about your schedule too. Having somebody the FTA provides a very detailed, comprehensive project management plan. It doesn't update itself. Having a resource during the design to keep up with the P&P, and then as you get into construction, keeping up with your P&P and the contractor's plan is critical. A risk register too. Starting a risk register at inception, early in the process, and controlling your risks by either attempting to mitigate them through your design, or you have to allocate them in your contract documents, regardless of what delivery method you use. The risks do not go away. And if they occur, somebody's going to pay for them. So it really is critical that you focus. That's a good lesson learned that we've got. And Bethel, I'm going to take a deep breath. Do you have anything to add on this slide?
I think you did a really great job covering everything. All of these things can be very pertinent to your projects. The only thing I was going to add, you had already mentioned involving the O&M team early, but I wanted to emphasize that because I've seen it happen where they're not incorporated into the project. Maybe at the very, very early stages of planning they are, but then they're not incorporated back in again until the project's been constructed and we're ready for startup. And really that's too late, because oftentimes during design and construction, the project can shift and it can change slightly, or maybe even more than slightly, and it can impact operations and maintenance. And so making sure that they are involved early and often to make sure that the goals that you actually had set forth at the beginning are still being met by the project are important. And they're going to be the ones who are going to have an intimate knowledge with that, because once it's constructed, whether it's a facility or a service route, they're going to know and understand what those needs are and whether they're still being met by the project. And so you don't want to construct something that isn't going to fully meet the needs that you had intended them to meet. And so making sure that they're involved early is really important. But that's all I was going to add, Alan.
Oh, that's such a great point, Bethel. Even many of the transit agencies use contractors to resource their O&M. And there cannot be an assumption that you can just tell that contractor what to do during construction. They need to be engaged, even if you're using a contractor for O&M. Got to engage them early. So thank you, Bethel, for emphasizing that. All right, Danny. All right, we did list, as we've listed with the other presentations and webinars, some resources. And these are hyperlinks, and I'm sorry I didn't list out the full HTTPS // If you need links, we can provide them. And I did too, while we're on this slide, Danny, I wanted to really give some special recognition to Jessica Yost. And she's procurement specialist for James City County, and she supports Williamsburg Area Transit, WATA, both professional services procurements and their construction projects. So she's been an invaluable resource for us, especially DRPT. She's taught us a great deal, been involved with meetings, sharing FTA provisions and requirements. And she's just a very knowledgeable resource, and we're very thankful for her. She did extend an invitation if any of you who are in the procurements for either professional services or a construction project want a little help or some guidance, you can connect with her and she'll do everything that she can to help. If you do, let me know and I'll pass along, Bethel and I will, your contact information to Jessica. But we're really thankful for her. She provided some input on this presentation and the content that we've shared too. So Danny, thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Thank you again, Alan and Bethel. If there's any questions, please ask them now. We don't have any at the moment, but there's one popping up. Bethel and Alan, great job walking us through. I wanted to add that sometimes due to the size of the program project, a sponsor may be needed to engage a CM as an agent.
Well, thank you, Niyi. That is a great point. Sorry, I was on mute. I'd muted, but
it happens to all of us. Thank you again, Alan and Bethel, and please, everybody on here, please reach out to them if you need them as a resource. We'll make sure to, when we post this video early next week, we'll also include their contact information out to everybody so that you can continue to reach out to them as you begin your own design build and facility development processes. So thank you again, Alan and Bethel, and looking forward to seeing you again in a couple months for the next one. And thank you, Oscar Gonzalez. Thank you for great information and insights. We appreciate that. Everybody have a great Friday, and thank you again.
Great. Thank you, VTA. Thanks, Danny.